What's good, y'all? Solomon here. I hope you're having a great day. Before we get into today's Hippopotamus Defense video, I wanted to mention that I'm giving out a 30% off discount code for both of my online courses, including the Hippopotamus Defense. Okay, if you're interested in that 30% off sale, all you got to do is go down to the description below or the pinned comment. You will see the link there. Click on that link and plug in the discount code June 2024, and you will receive 30% off on the course. Okay, hundreds have gotten it. Many have told me that they have enjoyed it, and I'm not selling something I don't believe in. Okay, I really do believe in the Hippopotamus Defense as a very underrated, very strong weapon for white or black, either side. And I've used it exclusively as white and black to reach the National Master title and OTB tournament play. I beat GMs, IMs, and quite a few high-level players with it. And I don't say that to brag, but more to say that I really do think the Hippo works. There's a ton of benefits behind playing it. I think one of them is you're just taking your opponent out of their theory. I don't care what you play. If you play, let's say I'm playing as black. If you play the King's Indian attack, if you play the Danish gambit, if you play the Vienna game, it doesn't matter. Because when I play the Hippo, all that theory goes out the window. Okay, and your opponent's going to sit there and probably be kind of looking around like, what on earth's happening? I've never seen this in my life. You, on the other hand, you play it every game and you're growing in your comfortability. So yeah, I mean, I could keep going on why I think the Hippo is so strong. Again, I've been playing it exclusively as both colors and have been enjoying it a ton and getting pretty good results with it. So one other thing I do want to mention before getting into the video is that this course is not just for advanced Hippo players. Okay, it takes you from not knowing what the heck the Hippo is to a pretty strong level of mastery. That's the goal, right? So this is not like, oh, if you don't know X, Y, and Z, you can't get the course. I start at 0 and I build my way up from there. All that to say, if you do get the course, I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see y'all over in the main video. Let's get it. Quick shout out to my guy Makoto for putting Pavel Blatny on my radar. If you go on Wikipedia and you look up the Hippopotamus Defense, you're going to find that Pavel Blatny is one of the players listed who played the Hippo. Now, some of these players played the Hippo a ton, and then others like Gary Kasparov, for example, I've only been able to find a single game where Kasparov plays the Hippo. But Blatny, you know, he did play the Hippo multiple times in classical type formats, and we're going to be going over one of his better games today. I've had a lot of games similar to this and ideas, you know, in terms of attacking play on the Kingside, and I think that there's really a lot of common threads and themes in this game that really resonate with what the Hippo is all about. So I'm excited to show you this one. Here we have Blatny playing as black, and we see this move E4 from white. We have 1, 2, and 3. This is personally how I start out the Hippo. Not the only way, but I like starting out prioritizing Kingside development. We now have knight D7, E6, tucking the second knight, looking to fianchetto that second bishop, and here the move of H6, right? A6 is pointless because of that pawn on C4, and B5 cannot be played. Of course, if you want to play C5, A6 can be helpful to cover that knight from jumping in, but H6 is a much better idea here because without a pawn on F4, G5 is actually a possibility, right? In the Hippopotamus Defense, we're starting slow. We're getting our own setup, but then from here, we want to start making space, right? Looking at weaknesses, finding targets, and slowly putting a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more pressure on the opponent until all of a sudden we have a better game. We're looking towards this move of G5. At some point after the move of Bishop F1, we see castling Kingside and King H7. Now, King H7 is a good move in general because of the fact that it defends H6. Some of you, and for good reason, might be wondering why does that matter, because the bishop already defends it. But notice now that this bishop is more free to run if it needs to at some point without worrying about H6, right? Because that's covered by the king. So the king's nice and tucked, and it's also doing a good defensive job as well. D5 is played, and now we have the move of E5. Okay, E5 locking things up. B4 is played, and you know, whenever we get a locked up center like this, we got to ask ourselves, which flank pawn can we push like crazy? I talk about this in my Hippopotamus Defense course. Which pawn can we push like crazy, and which pawn should we really never touch? In this kind of position, this pawn is backwards, right? It can't move forward with the support of another pawn on our side of the board. So this pawn on c7, we got to keep this here. This is our base of the pawn chain. This is the weakest pawn, technically speaking, out of all of the highlighted pawns because it's defending them, right? The rest of those pawns are defended by a pawn. This one is obviously not. If we play a move like c5 here, white can capture. d6 is terribly weak. And on top of that, there's a d5 square that white can take advantage of. Okay, in this case, white could take on d6. We could see a move like knight b5 going for that pawn. What does black get out of this? Not much, except a really weak pawn and a great outpost for white to take advantage of. That's about it. So we really want to keep this pawn here. However, the f pawn, let's push it like crazy, right? Let's go after their weak pawn, because between these two weak pawns, which one's the target? Well, the one that's further away from us, the one that isn't defended by another pawn. In this case, let's play that move of f5. Blatny here just starting to really turn the pressure up a little bit on the king side. And you know, again, people say that the Hippo is slow, and I understand what they're saying, right? The first 10 moves, we're not doing anything crazy, but how many other openings are like that? In the King's Indian Defense, is black trying to get a crazy attack in the first 10 moves? In the Pierce Defense, is black trying to do anything crazy in the first moves? Right? There's a lot of openings that don't put the pressure on you right away, especially from the black side. And the Hippo here, I mean, we have a very kind of King's Indian Defense type position, starting to, you know, play f5. We have that locked up pawn structure. Knights are supporting. They're ready to start jumping in at a moment's notice. If a move like e takes f5, since the center is not locked up, I would usually take with the pawn here. This is what I'd recommend, simply because two pawns side by side are very hard to deal with. White's always going to have to be thinking about what if f4, what if e4, and we don't have to play either of these. We can play them whenever we want. We'll play that at the right moment. So okay, and so we have that move of knight d2. f4 is a move here that does work, but I like the move of a5 that Blatny went with here, just, you know, putting a little bit of pressure on that queen side. Notice that white really has to play one move, at least from a practical standpoint. Now, if a move like b takes a5, we'll take back with the rook. And we got to think about pawn breaks in chess, right? Not just right now, but potentiality. What pawns for white can break open black's position? When we talk about pawn breaks, we're talking about pawn moves that make an impact on the opponent's structure. For example, h3, that wasn't really a pawn break, because did it affect us? In a sense, sure, because it changed the board setup, but it didn't affect our setup directly. Now, if a move like f4 is played, that's a pawn break, because, you know, our structure is being affected. All that said, a move like f4, I mean, thanks for the pawn. Let's look towards the queen side. None of these pawns can move. Okay, I mean, I guess the pawn on c4 can technically move, but we have a double pawn clamp on that square now, and a knight, and a rook. I mean, that pawn's not moving. And if you push the pawn to a4, go ahead. I mean, I don't really care that much, right? So it feels like because white decided to capture that pawn, they kind of lost some support for that c5 push. Similarly, if a move like b5, none of these pawns really have a future. Now, of course, neither do any of ours on the queen side, but that's okay. We're focusing on the king side right now. We're never going to move this. Please don't move this into position like so. I mean, if you do that, you're going to get en passanted, you're going to get forked, all that kind of, you know, not fun stuff. Just continue pushing, right? Play a move like f4. This is the side that you want to play on. This is the side that you really want to invest in. Maybe, you know, at some point drop the bishop back to c8, play fun attacking chess. Keep the following side closed and look towards opening up the king side as we start to really put more and more pressure on the opponent's king. And finally, if a move like bishop a3, okay, we take back, but now it's not a pawn supporting c5, but it's a bishop. And this is a lot weaker for white because, I mean, let's just say we push, for example, right? c5, this is not supported by a pawn. It's supported by a bishop. And because of that, we can just take it. And I mean, if you want to give up your bishop, go ahead, but it's not a great option. We often talk about the queen being the most valuable piece in chess, and that's true. I mean, obviously, if I'd rather have a queen or a pawn, I'm taking the freaking queen. However, it is interesting because pawns are actually, in my opinion, the best defenders in chess, right? They're the best defenders in chess because they're expendable. You can give them away, right? If you have a pawn defending a square, you're willing to give up that pawn. And because of that, pieces are less apt to jump into that square. However, if you have a queen, right, let's just say we had a queen here. Does that really support c5 like a pawn does? No, because the queen's not willing to give itself up. So sometimes the least valuable the piece, the more expendable and therefore the better defender it is in those types of situations. Now, hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions below. I know I just said that pawns are better defenders than queens, but I think you see what I mean. And just the fact that pawns are expendable, and because of that, they're better defenders because pieces don't want to trade off for that mere little pawn, right? Whereas a queen, for example, the queen is very powerful, but in the opening, right? Let's just talk about the Scandinavian for a second, right? The Scandinavian defense, when our queen gets attacked in the Scandinavian, or if we bring our queen out early at any point and it starts getting attacked, we got to start running away with the queen. The queen's the most powerful, but at the same time, it's running all over the place because it doesn't want to trade for anything. If you offer a trade, if you offer to take a pawn and give up your knight, the opponent's like, go ahead, take my pawn, right? So sometimes pawns and pieces like that are less kind of running around like crazy, whereas a queen, you got to hold on to it. Oh, let's say A5 is played. White knows this, and they play the move A3, right? They know that, so they defend it with a pawn so that in the future, C5 will be supported not by a piece that has to be given up, but by a pawn that can be given up. We now see the move Bishop C8. I have so many games with positions very similar to this. I almost wonder if I've ever had a game in this exact position. I'm not sure, in all honesty, but I do get positions like this all the time with this locked up center. The bishop drops back. Remember, when the bishop is not doing too well, when the opponent spends so much time making our bishop not active, okay, great, let's drop it back. Now we have a great attacking piece. G3 is played. We have knight f6, just slowly bringing pieces towards the king side. In these kind of positions, you just got to slowly add the pressure, slowly improve your pieces. F4, taking up some space. White could have captured, but it's not a great idea. Okay, that's not the best idea in the world. Knight h5 is a move that the engine's actually looking at. E takes f4 works as well. Okay, so if we take that pawn, two things come out of this in our advantage. First off, our bishop activates. This is great for us. Second off, we get the e5 square as an outpost. So let's take advantage of that. I mean, if a move like bishop d2, we can take on b4. That's fine. But we want to play something like knight d7, throw our knight into e5. Great outpost. When they capture back, we don't want a pawn here. We don't want to give white leverage to start pushing. Let's capture back with the bishop. If a move like f3, we can play g5 and start really trying to activate our knight. Great control of the dark squares here and black here, really with a one game if we play it correctly. Going back, again, to g takes f4, knight h5 is also an option here. Just going after that pawn right away. If we see captures, now the bishop can take back. I mean, talk about activity here, right? Everyone wants to talk about how the hippo is so timid, how the hippo is so slow, but I don't know. From my looks of it, white here just can't do much, and black is the one in the driver's seat. So after that move, f4, white plays c5. They're trying to create some counterplay here. Notice c5 is only possible because a pawn supports it. And we could start taking, right? But then we don't want to mess up our pawn structure. For example, we don't want to take and then take again and kind of, give ourselves double isolated pawns, give white the ability to think about a move like d6 at some point. Give white the ability to start going after the c5 pawn. Instead, we see black take on b4 and take on c5, just getting rid of some of the tension on that side. White here does get an open file. We do as well. And now black continuing to push with g5. This kind of arrow type attack, everything leading up to that f4 pawn. White responds with knight c4, putting some pressure on d6. And now we have knight e8. This is one of my favorite moves from the game because it's two-purposed. First off, it's actually helping our attack. The rook is getting more active. The rook has better vision, right, to take or to push, all that kind of good stuff. On top of that, by playing knight here, we're defending the pawn on d6, and this is the weakest pawn that we have right now. Now, technically, if you look at the pawn structure itself, c7 is pretty weak, but white is going to capture here pretty soon. And as y'all can see, I mean, white really has a ton of pressure on that pawn. We have to defend it well. Now let's take a moment to count the attackers and defenders that white has. In this instance, white has two attackers. Let's make it three after bishop a3. So white has three attackers. Black, on the other hand, has three defenders. And we have that move in knight g6, right? If we have as many defenders as they do attackers, we're going to win that trade every time, right? So white needs to have a +1 in order to win it. If white does play a move like knight b5, which by the way they did, rook a6 is an option, which we see in the game. So we now have 4 attackers, 4 defenders. We're still good here. We're still fine. White could have went with c takes d6. This isn't a huge blunder or even a mistake, really. Maybe a tiny mistake according to the engine, but we take back. If white continues to take stuff, I mean, this is just bad for a number of reasons. As I mentioned, we could just keep taking and taking and taking. We're going to end up winning that, being the ones that finish that out. On top of that, we could play the move rook takes a3 right now. I mean, if you want to take the rook, thanks for the knight. We're doing great there. If you want to take our knight, we could play this crazy move of f takes g3. This is the only engine move that gives us the lead. If white takes on g3, the rook flies over, putting pressure on the king. Another active rook, active bishop. I mean, knight ready to just pounce into one of these dark squares. This is losing for white. I mean, this is just dead lost. And if, let's say, white, wants to take the bishop or something, okay, we'll take on f2 with check, and we'll make a second queen while capturing your rook. And if you want to take our rook, same thing, right? Take on f2, make a second queen. Of course, we're going to lose it right away, but at the end of it, we're going to take this off, and we're simply up a piece. We're just up a piece here, plus white's king is very exposed. So rook a6 is played. White wisely moves the bishop here, just getting it out of the line of sight from that rook. And we now see Blatny continue with rook f7, getting his rook off of this diagonal. Queen c2 is played. We capture on c5 and now play g4. Notice here just how much tension we are putting on the king side. White here could have played h4, which looks good at first sight at least, but it doesn't really keep the position closed because black here has the sacrifice of knight takes h4, taking with the queen, f3 ideas, g3 ideas. White here is in major trouble. So instead, we see the move of h captures on g4. We take back with the bishop. We see the move of rook b3. How can we continue to make space here? How can we continue to improve our position? There's a number of different moves, but one of them is h5, which we see. Knight a7 is played. Queen g5. Black here. Notice, black's not trying to mate the king in two moves. Black is trying to make space, improve the queen. The very next move, what do we see black do? Make space. What do we see the next move? Black start to break things open. What do we see the next move? Black improve another piece. Chess is all about improving your pieces while trying to not let your opponent improve theirs. That bishop on g7, I love this idea. I love this idea. Earlier, right, the bishop wasn't very active on b7. White spent a ton of time locking it up. Okay, cool. Now it's one of our best attacking pieces. Similarly, we have a locked up center here. The bishop's not doing much. That's fine. That doesn't mean we made a mistake. That just means that based on white's response to our position, the bishop's not active. But it's going to be hard for white to keep that bishop down from all three of these diagonals. Okay, one of these diagonals is, or two, or sometimes even three, are usually a good spot. Rook f1 is played. What piece is not very active? I'd say the knight on e8 is not the best. Okay, let's get it in. All right, let's bring that knight in. Knight d8 is played, attacking the rook. Where can we put this rook where it's a better attacking piece against the king? Well, rook g7, because it's literally eyeing that king. If we see something like knight e6, we can capture back, take on g3. Oof, an attacking presence here for black, crushing position. So instead we see the move knight f3. But okay, we move our queen h5. Right, we're attacking here. We don't want to just trade for trade's sake. We want to keep material on the board. We want to keep our firepower as much as we can and put as much pressure as we can on that king. Knight h2 is played. We now take on g3. And I know just a second ago I was saying don't trade, but we don't want to trade for trade's sake, right? Trades aren't always bad. But like in this case, if white takes on g4, they're losing a very valuable defender. We have a very strong pawn on g3. We can capture back with our knight. Take this pawn all you want. We have a mate threat on h2. Great game. So instead we have the move of rook takes on g3. All right, let's activate our knight. Knight f4. Looking towards e2 with check, forking the rook and the king. White looks to slow this down by cutting off the vision of the queen, but now we just take with the knight. We're threatening a mate in one. Right, Blatny here, just great attacking game. Bishop f3, giving that h2 square some defense. Queen h4, looking towards that rook. The rook gives itself up, we take, and here white resigns the game, okay? I can't tell you how many games I've had like this myself, okay? And I'm not saying I'm as good of a player as Pavel Blatny, obviously, very strong player, but I would say that a lot of these ideas that we talked about, locking up the center when you see d5, bringing the bishop back, slowly improving pieces on the king side, trying to keep the queen side as locked down as you can, keeping that pawn on c7. So many of these ideas I have used in hundreds of games by this point. Okay, this is very transferable. These ideas are very transferable. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just face it, Kasparov's Mortal game, I don't know if that's very transferable, at least for me. I don't think I can actually, see that game and start playing like Kasparov. But when I see this game, I can start trying to model my game after Pavel Blatny. Right? Now, I'm not saying that a player like Kasparov we can't model. He's actually one of my favorite players. But there's certain games that are immortal games. There's certain games that are so strong and so good and so memorable, like Hikaru Nakamura giving up his queen 6 times against Boris Gelfand, and they're fun to look at. But every game I play, am I going to be able to give up my queen 6 times? Is that going to work? Statistically, no. Most of the time, that just doesn't work. There's a reason that in most games we don't see Hikaru giving up his queen 6 times. But in the Hippo, this whole bishop c8, keep the pawn on c7, push f5, f4, all that kind of stuff, we see this all the time. We see this all the time. And here white resigns. I mean, we have forced mate no matter what. Let's just say white plays king h1, for example. Okay, queen h3. If you want to block with the queen, you can capture off your rook, throw in another check, and mate. And if a move like king g1, what piece is not in the game here? What piece is not active? I would say all 3 of these are pretty active pieces. The rook on a6, is that posing a threat to the enemy king right now? Not really. So let's do it. Let's bring that rook over. Rook g6. Beautiful idea. And once the king moves, queen g3, we have ourselves a game over if the game continued. But again, white resigns here after queen takes g4. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace. What's up, y'all? Solomon here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I appreciate y'all a ton. And if you haven't subscribed before, just a quick reminder, to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell as well. If you're wanting more content like this to help you improve in your game and all that kind of stuff. And real quickly as well, I wanted to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of June in 2024. I appreciate y'all a ton. You guys are helping me do this full time. And if you haven't checked it out before, I highly recommend that you go check out some of the benefits that you gain by becoming a member. And I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.